A sick millionaire falls in love with a nurse he keeps encountering in every hospital he's admitted to. When he discovered her story, he decided to do something crazy. The clock read 4 a.m. when Lucy Miller opened her eyes, anticipating the alarm's shrill cry. Her body begged for just a few more minutes of rest, but she knew it was impossible. With silent movements, careful not to wake anyone, she slid out of bed, feeling the weight of exhaustion in every muscle. "Just one more day," she whispered to herself, splashing her face with cold water, trying to wash away the fatigue that never truly left her. The small apartment in Astoria, Queens, was shrouded in silence. Lucy peeked into the adjoining room, where her twin toddlers, Sophia and Miranda, slept wrapped in each other's arms. At just 2 years old, the girls were the picture of innocence, oblivious to the sacrifices their mother made every day to ensure they wanted for nothing. "You're leaving already, honey." The weak voice of Carmen, her mother, startled her from the kitchen doorway. "Mom, you should be resting. Your medication is supposed to help you sleep in." "How can I sleep when I hear you tiptoeing around at 4 in the morning? Come on, sit down, I made you some coffee." Lucy glanced at the clock, 4:30 a.m. She had to get everything ready before 6 a.m. when her first shift at Elmhurst Hospital began. Still, she couldn't refuse to share a few moments with her mother. As they drank their coffee, Lucy meticulously organized Carmen's medications. The advanced rheumatoid arthritis she suffered from required costly treatments that consumed a large portion of their budget. "These are for 8 a.m., these are for noon, and these are before bed. Don't forget the anti-inflammatories if the pain wakes you up," Lucy explained, with the precision of someone who knew not only her job inside and out, but also the suffering of her most beloved person. "So many pills, sweetheart. Sometimes I think I'm more of a burden than a help. Don't you ever say that, Mom?" Lucy took her mother's gnarled, disease-worn hands in her own. "Without you, who would watch my girls while I work? You're the rock of this family." By 5:30 a.m., Lucy was ready, her white uniform immaculate despite countless washes and ironings. She kissed her sleeping daughters on the forehead, silently promising them that one day everything would be easier. The commute to Elmhurst Hospital was long and arduous. The New York City subway was just starting its morning rush, packed with workers who, like her, began their day with the first light. Lucy used those moments to mentally review her schedule. A 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. shift at Elmhurst, 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Lenox Hill Hospital, and 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. at Brooklyn Community Hospital. 4 hours to sleep, if she was lucky, and no shift ran late. Her first shift passed as it always did, between patients needing medication, dressings to be changed, and anxious families to be calmed. Despite her exhaustion, Lucy offered each one a genuine smile, a kind gesture, a word of encouragement. For her, nursing wasn't just a job, it was a calling. At 2:30 p.m., while quickly devouring a slice of pizza from a street cart near Lenox Hill, Lucy mentally reviewed the month's expenses: the rent, her mother's medication, daycare for when Carmen couldn't handle the girls' food. Every penny was accounted for, every expense calculated. There was no room for surprises. "Excuse me, can I get a plain slice?" A man in a tailored suit sat next to her at the small counter. Lucy barely glanced at him, focused on finishing quickly so she wouldn't be late for her second shift. Lenox Hill, more modern and better equipped than Elmhurst, catered to a different clientele. Located on the Upper East Side, many of its patients were wealthy individuals or foreigners. Lucy had landed the job thanks to her excellent academic record and her fluency in English, honed in night classes during her college years. "Miller, you have a new admission in 512, the charge nurse informed her as she stepped onto the floor. 48-year-old male, possible cardiac event, stable but needs constant monitoring. Lucy nodded, heading immediately to the indicated room. Inside, she found a middle-aged man connected to several monitors. He had dark hair with touches of grey at the temples and a face that, despite its pallor, showed strong, defined features. "Good afternoon, Mr. Davis. I'm Lucy Miller, and I'll be your nurse for this shift," she introduced herself while checking the machines. The man opened his eyes, a deep brown that contrasted with his olive complexion. For a moment he looked surprised, as if he'd been expecting someone else. "How are you feeling today?" she asked while taking his blood pressure. "Like I've been run over by a truck," he answered, his voice hoarse but polite. What Lucy didn't know was that Alexander Monroe, not Davis as his chart read, was one of the most important entrepreneurs in the United States. The owner of the Monroe Group, a conglomerate spanning from construction to technology, he had decided to check in under a pseudonym after suffering a mild heart attack during a business meeting. The last thing he needed was the press finding out about his condition, especially now that he was negotiating the biggest merger of his career. As Lucy adjusted his IV drip and checked his vitals, Alexander watched her with curiosity. He was used to being surrounded by people who were either trying to impress him or get something from him. This young nurse, however, treated him with a professionalism and warmth that seemed entirely genuine. "May I ask you something?" he said, as she was finishing her notes on his chart. "Of course, Mr. Davis. How long have you been awake?" The question caught Lucy by surprise. "Since 4 a.m. Why?" "Because despite that, your smile seems genuine. It's refreshing." Lucy tried to hide her astonishment at the personal observation. "It's part of the job, sir. Now please get some rest. I'll be back in an hour with your medication." As she left the room, Lucy couldn't imagine that this chance encounter would change her life forever. Nor could she know that the businessman, watching her walk away, felt something for the first time in years that he thought was long forgotten, a genuine interest in someone beyond business and appearances. Her second shift ended promptly at 9 p.m., and Lucy had to run to catch the subway that would take her to her third job. As she traveled, she allowed herself to close her eyes for a few minutes. Just 5 more hours to go, then she could sleep. Until the clock struck 4 a.m. again, and another identical day began. What she didn't know was that back at Lenox Hill, Alexander Monroe had specifically requested that Lucy be assigned as his permanent nurse during his stay. "There's something about her," he had told his personal assistant, "a dignity, a strength you don't see every day. I want to know more about her." 2 weeks had passed since Alexander Monroe was admitted to Lenox Hill Hospital. His recovery was progressing well, though his doctors warned he would need to rest and follow a strict medication regimen for at least 3 more months. "This is non-negotiable, Mr. Davis," his cardiologist said firmly while signing the discharge papers. "A second episode could be fatal." Alexander nodded distractedly, his eyes scanning the hallways for Lucy. During his stay, he had looked forward to each of the nurses' visits, sometimes feigning minor discomfort, just so she would stay in his room a little longer. He wanted to say goodbye to her, but her shift had been changed that day. "Rick, find out Nurse Miller's schedule," he ordered his assistant as soon as they settled into the plush leather seats of the Mercedes waiting outside. "The nurse? What for, sir?" Rick asked, surprised. "Just do it," Alexander replied curtly. Back in his penthouse overlooking Central Park, Alexander felt restless. Accustomed to controlling every aspect of his life, this interest in a woman he barely knew felt strange. What was it about her that he found so fascinating? Was it her dedication, her human touch, or simply the fact that she treated him like any other patient? 3 days later, during a meeting with Japanese investors at a restaurant in Midtown, Alexander began to feel a sharp pain in his chest. He tried to ignore it, focusing on the numbers they were discussing, but soon the pain became unbearable. "Mr. Monroe, are you all right?" one of the investors asked, seeing him turn pale. Alexander couldn't answer. The last thing he remembered was Rick yelling for an ambulance as everything went dark. When he opened his eyes, he was in an unfamiliar room, once again connected to monitors and IVs. The dim light indicated it was nighttime. As he turned his head, his heart gave a jolt that even the cardiac monitor registered. There was Lucy adjusting a medication in his IV drip. "You again?" he asked in a weak voice, genuinely surprised. Lucy turned to him, her expression shifting from professional concentration to a soft smile of recognition. "I work at several hospitals," she answered simply. "I didn't expect to see you here, Mr. Davis. This isn't exactly the reunion either of us would have wanted. Tell me about it." Alexander tried to joke, but a coughing fit cut him off. "Don't exert yourself," she said, bringing him a glass of water. "You were lucky. Brooklyn Community Hospital was close to the restaurant, and the ambulance got here quickly." Alexander drank slowly, noticing they were alone in the room. This hospital was more modest than Lenox Hill, and the room, though private, lacked the luxuries he was used to. "You know, I might almost think you're following me," Lucy commented with a slight smile as she wrote something on his chart. "Or maybe it's fate," he replied, surprising himself with how cheesy he sounded. Over the next few days, Alexander observed Lucy with renewed interest. At Brooklyn Community Hospital, located in a less affluent part of the city, she worked the night shift. Alexander noticed that her uniform here looked more worn, as if she saved her best one for the hospital on the Upper East Side. "Don't you ever rest?" he asked her one night, when he saw her struggling to keep her eyes open while checking his vitals. "Enough," she answered curtly. "With all due respect, those dark circles under your eyes say otherwise." Lucy sighed, a rare gesture for her. She normally maintained a professional barrier with all her patients. "It is what it is, Mr. Davis. Some people just have to work harder than others." That night around 3 a.m., Alexander pressed the call button. He didn't feel any real discomfort. He just wanted to see her. When Lucy hurried in, he noticed she was even paler than before. "Do you need something, Mr. Davis?" she asked, her professional voice contrasting with the slight tremor in her hands. "Actually, I just wanted to talk a bit. The nights are long in here." She looked as if she was about to scold him, but just then her knees buckled. She quickly grabbed the edge of the bed to keep from falling. "Nurse!" Alexander tried to sit up to help her. "I'm fine," Lucy replied, steadying herself with an effort. "I just need a moment. Sit here, please." Alexander pointed to the chair beside his bed. "That's a doctor's order," he added with a smile. Surprisingly, Lucy obeyed. For a moment, they sat in silence. "Why do you work so much?" Alexander finally asked. "3 hospitals. It must be exhausting." Lucy looked up, weighing whether to answer. There was something about this patient, a sincerity in his questions, that broke through her usual defenses. "I have 2 little girls, twins," she finally answered, "and my mother is sick. They need me. And your husband doesn't help." A shadow crossed Lucy's face. "There is no husband. He passed away before the girls were born. An accident at the construction site where he worked." Alexander nodded, not offering the typical platitudes she had heard so many times. "My mother has advanced rheumatoid arthritis," Lucy continued, surprised at herself for sharing so much. "The medications are expensive, but without them she's in too much pain. She watches the girls while I work, so 3 jobs," Alexander finished for her. "I'm not looking for pity," Lucy clarified, her professional tone returning. "I'm just answering your question, Mr. Davis." "Alexander," he corrected. "My name is Alexander." The next day, Rick, Alexander's assistant, showed up with some documents. "It's all set, sir. The Healthcare Personnel Assistance Program is ready. We can transfer the funds directly to her bank account or pay for the medication and daycare." "Perfect. Make sure it looks completely official. She can't suspect a thing." That evening, when Lucy arrived for her shift, the supervisor called her into her office. "Miller, you need to fill out these forms," she said, handing her some papers with the hospital's letterhead. "You've been selected for the new financial assistance program for healthcare staff. It will cover your mother's medication and your daughter's daycare for 1 year." Lucy looked at the papers in disbelief. "Assistance program? I've never heard of it." "It's new, funded by anonymous donors. A blessing, isn't it?" Lucy studied the documents carefully. Something didn't feel right. Her eyes stopped on one detail. The start date of the supposed program was the exact date of Alexander's admission. That night, she walked into Alexander's room with a serious expression. "Are you feeling better, Mr. Davis? Or should I say, Mr. Anonymous Benefactor?" Alexander was taken aback by her tone. "I don't know what you're talking about, nurse." Lucy dropped the forms onto his bed. "I don't need charity, sir. I can support my family with my own hard work just as I've always done." "It's not charity," Alexander protested. "It's recognition for your work." "It's humiliating," she replied, picking up the papers. "I appreciate the thought, but no. Now, if you don't need anything else, I have other patients to attend to." Alexander watched her leave, feeling a mix of frustration and admiration. It was the first time in years that anyone had refused his money, and somehow that made her even more special in his eyes. A month had passed since the incident at Brooklyn Community Hospital. Lucy's life continued its relentless pace. 3 jobs, 2 little girls, and a sick mother. The few times she thought about the peculiar patient named Alexander Davis, she wondered if he had followed the doctor's orders or if his stubbornness had landed him back in an emergency room. What Lucy didn't know was that Alexander Monroe had submitted to a strict recovery regimen, more out of a hope not to disappoint a certain nurse than out of fear for his own health. During that month, he had tried to find out more about her, while respecting her decision to refuse his help. "Sir, the board is waiting," Rick reminded him as they entered the imposing Monroe Group building on Park Avenue. Alexander nodded, adjusting his tie. It was his first important meeting since the second cardiac episode. His doctors had insisted he wait longer, but business couldn't wait forever. The boardroom was buzzing with tension when Alexander walked in. The merger with a major Japanese tech firm was on the line, and several shareholders were skeptical. "As you can see from the reports," Alexander began in his usual authoritative tone, "this merger will strategically position us in the Asian market, generating a projected 30% increase in our stock value by the next—" Suddenly, he felt a pressure in his chest, far more intense than before. He tried to ignore it, but a cold sweat began to bead on his forehead. The voices around him grew distant. "Mr. Monroe?" Rick's concerned voice was the last thing he heard before he collapsed onto the table. This time it was much more serious. The ambulance rushed him to University General Hospital, the most prestigious medical center in the city. The doctors determined he needed immediate intervention. During the procedure, he went into cardiac arrest, further complicating everything. When he finally regained consciousness 3 days later, the first thing he felt was an intense pain in his chest, and the second, a strange sense of déjà vu. Next to his bed, adjusting his IV drip, was Lucy. "This can't be a coincidence anymore," he murmured in a weak voice, half amused, half incredulous. Lucy turned with a start, and upon recognizing him, an involuntary smile lit up her tired face. "It seems you're determined to visit every hospital I work at, Mr. Davis," she replied, checking his vitals. "Alexander," he corrected. "We're past the formal stage, don't you think? You shouldn't be talking so much. The surgery was complicated." "Then stay and talk to me." Lucy glanced at her watch. She had other patients to see, but something in this man's gaze stopped her every time. 5 minutes, she finally conceded, sitting in the chair beside his bed. "And only because you're technically in critical recovery and shouldn't be left alone." Over the following days, Alexander's condition slowly improved. Unlike the previous times, he would now require a longer hospital stay. University General, with its cutting-edge technology and highly qualified staff, was the ideal place for his recovery, though he had additional reasons to appreciate his stay there. Lucy covered the afternoon shift at this hospital from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m. Little by little, their conversations became more personal. During the quiet afternoon hours, when the hallways were less crowded, she sometimes allowed herself to stay a few extra minutes in his room. "Tell me more about your daughters," Alexander asked one afternoon as she changed his dressing. "Sophia and Miranda," Lucy said, her face transforming at the mention of their names. "They just turned 2. They're identical, but so different. Sophia is the adventurer, always climbing and exploring. Miranda is quieter. She just watches everything with those curious little eyes." "Do they look like you or your husband?" Lucy was quiet for a moment. "Edward," she finally answered. "They have his eyes, his smile." Alexander noticed the sadness in her voice and didn't press further. But over the next few days, Lucy shared pieces of her story, like small puzzle pieces that Alexander treasured. She told him how she met Edward in college, when she was studying nursing and he was studying civil engineering, how they married young, full of dreams, how they were planning a life together when they found out they were expecting twins, a surprise that filled them with joy. "Everything changed on a Wednesday," Lucy recounted one night as a typical seasonal thunderstorm raged outside. Edward was working on a new shopping mall construction. There was an accident, a poorly secured beam. "I was 7 months pregnant when I buried him." Alexander remained respectfully silent. He offered no empty words of comfort. He just listened, and that was exactly what Lucy needed. "The girls were born prematurely a month later," she continued. "I think they felt my grief. They spent their first few weeks in incubators. My mum sold the small house she had in North Carolina to help us, and she moved in with me. That's when she was diagnosed with arthritis. And that's when the 3 jobs started," Alexander concluded. "That's right," Lucy nodded. "There was no other choice. The hospital bills, my mother's medicine, the rent, the food. Life doesn't wait, you know. It doesn't give you time to grieve." With every conversation, Alexander's admiration for this woman grew. He, who had been born into a wealthy family and multiplied his fortune with intelligence and opportunity, felt small before the strength of someone who had faced so much with so little. One night, as Lucy was reviewing the results of his latest tests, Alexander dared to ask, "Have you thought about moving on? A woman like you shouldn't be alone." Lucy looked up, surprised by the question. "There's no time for that when I can barely sleep 4 hours a night," she replied, shaking her head. "Besides, my priorities are clear. First my daughters and my mother, then my patients. There's no room for anything else." But as she spoke those words, Something in her eyes as they met Alexander's contradicted her determination. A flicker, a spark that she herself didn't recognize but that he saw clearly. "You know," Alexander said, subtly changing the subject, "I've never asked you why you decided to become a nurse." Lucy smiled, grateful for the change in conversation. "Because of my grandmother," she replied. "We lived in a small town in North Carolina. There were no doctors nearby, and she was the local healer. She taught me about herbal remedies and basic care. When someone got sick, everyone went to Eleanor. I saw how her hands eased pain, how her presence brought comfort. I wanted to be like her, but with scientific knowledge." "You succeeded," Alexander stated with sincerity. "You have healing hands." Lucy blushed slightly, something that had never happened with a patient before. "It's late," she said, regaining her professionalism. "You should rest." That night, on the last subway ride home, Lucy found herself thinking of Alexander more as a man than as a patient. She mentally scolded herself. It was inappropriate, unprofessional, and above all, pointless. "He's just a kind patient with a heart condition," she reminded herself. "A man who will soon leave the hospital and go on with his life, just as I will with mine." What Lucy couldn't imagine was that in his luxurious hospital room, Alexander Monroe, one of the most powerful men in America, was making plans to ensure he didn't leave her life once he left the hospital. University General Hospital had become a different place for Alexander Monroe. The days that once would have been filled with unbearable tedium now passed with a strange mix of slowness and speed. Slow during the hours when Lucy wasn't on her shift, fast when she appeared in her crisp uniform, and that smile that, unbeknownst to her, made his heart race more than any arrhythmia. "Your levels have improved remarkably," Dr. Ramirez commented during his morning rounds. "If you keep this up, I could discharge you in a week." Alexander nodded distractedly. The news, which should have made him happy, filled him with an unexpected anxiety. Leaving the hospital meant losing this daily contact with Lucy, this connection that had blossomed within the sterile walls of his room. "Aren't you happy, Mr. Davis?" the doctor asked, noticing his lack of enthusiasm. "Of course, doctor. I'm just thinking about the adjustments I'll have to make." When the doctor left, Alexander called Rick, who appeared minutes later with his usual briefcase and efficient expression. "I need you to look into something," Alexander ordered without preamble. "I want to know Lucy Miller's exact schedules at all 3 hospitals, and I also need you to schedule a series of checkups and follow-up therapies that coincide with her shifts." Rick looked at him with a mix of surprise and concern. "Sir, with all due respect, don't you think you're going too far? You already tried to help her financially and she refused. This seems obsessive," Alexander completed with a half-smile. "Perhaps it is, Rick, but I can't explain what I feel when she's near. It's as if everything in this room changes, as if the air is easier to breathe." "You barely know her," Rick insisted. "You've spent your entire life surrounded by people looking to take advantage of you. How do you know she's different?" "Because she refused my money," Alexander answered simply. "Because when she looks at me, she doesn't see the businessman Alexander Monroe. She sees just another patient who needs care. And because, for the first time in my life, I feel real when I'm with her." Rick sighed, recognizing the determination in his boss's eyes. The same determination that had made him one of the most successful men in the country was now aimed at something entirely different. "As you wish, sir. I'll arrange everything." For Lucy, the days had also taken on a different rhythm. She caught herself fixing her appearance a little more before her shift at University General, perhaps applying a touch of lip gloss or making sure her hair was perfectly tied back. She scolded herself for these small vanities but couldn't help it. Without realizing it, she had begun to reorganize her tasks to maximize the time she spent in Alexander's room. Sometimes she would enter with the excuse of checking his IV, other times to check his blood pressure, even when it wasn't strictly necessary. These moments had become an oasis in her grueling routine. "Can I ask you something personal?" Alexander said one afternoon, as Lucy was changing the dressing on his chest. "Depends on the question," she answered with a cautious smile. "What is your biggest dream? I don't mean immediate wants, but the dream you keep for yourself, the one you've maybe never told anyone." Lucy paused, surprised by the question. No one had asked her something like that in years. Everyone assumed her dreams were limited to day-to-day survival. "To have my own clinic," she answered after a pause. "A small one, in a neighborhood where people really need it. A place where people can receive dignified care regardless of whether they have money or not. Her eyes shone as she spoke. My grandmother taught me that healing is more than just giving medicine. It's listening, understanding, being there for someone. I'd like to create a space like that. That's a beautiful dream, Alexander said, moved by the passion in her voice. And I'm sure you'll achieve it one day. Maybe, she smiled with a hint of melancholy. But for now the reality is 3 jobs and barely enough time to breathe. As she finished applying the new dressing, her fingers accidentally brushed against the skin of Alexander's chest. A brief, almost imperceptible touch, but it was enough for both of them to feel an electric current pass between them. Lucy pulled her hand back, as if she'd been burned. Their eyes met for an instant that seemed to stretch into eternity. Sorry, she murmured, suddenly aware of the proximity between them, of the intimacy of the situation. There's nothing to be sorry for, he replied softly. Lucy hurriedly gathered the used materials and headed for the door. I'll be back later for your medication, she said in a professional voice, avoiding his gaze. Once outside the room, Lucy leaned against the hallway wall, her heart pounding. What was happening? She had cared for hundreds of patients, performed the same procedures countless times. Why was it different with him? Why had a simple touch unsettled her so much? That night, upon returning home, Lucy found her mother asleep in the armchair, and the twins snuggled together in their small bed. She stood watching them, marveling as always at those 2 identical, perfect faces. What am I doing? She asked herself in a whisper, gently stroking Sophia's hair. You 2 are my priority, my responsibility. While making tea in the kitchen, Lucy confronted the reality she had been avoiding. She was developing feelings for a patient. Something completely inappropriate, ethically questionable, and potentially damaging to her career. I can't afford this, she told herself. He needs medical care, not emotional complications. I need to keep my jobs, not fantasize about the impossible. She decided that starting the next day, she would keep her relationship with Alexander strictly professional. No more personal conversations, no more lingering moments in his room. She would try to be reassigned to another patient, if possible. What Lucy didn't know was that while she was making this resolution, Alexander was doing the exact opposite. He had decided that, once he was out of the hospital, he would find a way to be a part of Lucy Miller's life. Not as a patient, not as a rejected benefactor, but as a man who for the first time in decades felt his damaged heart beating with a purpose. I won't take no for an answer this time, Alexander murmured, looking out his window at the lights of New York City, spread out like a sea of fallen stars. I will find a way to help you achieve your dream, Lucy, even if you never know it's me. At that moment, in 2 different parts of the same city, 2 people who had known pain and loneliness in such different ways were looking at the same night sky, unaware that their lives were about to intertwine in ways neither could imagine. The news that Alexander Monroe, one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in America, was a patient at University General Hospital didn't take long to circulate through the city's most exclusive social circles. Although he had tried to maintain discretion by checking in as Alexander Davis, his prolonged absence from major events and board meetings had raised suspicion. Among those who learned of his situation was Veronica Sinclair, CEO of Aztec Labs, one of the country's largest pharmaceutical companies. But Veronica was not just a powerful businesswoman. 8 years ago, she had been Alexander's fiancée, until she left him when the Monroe Group was facing a severe financial crisis. Are you sure about this information? Veronica asked her assistant, gazing at the Manhattan skyline from her office on the 40th floor of a luxurious corporate tower. Completely, Ms. Sinclair. According to my source, he's been hospitalized for cardiac issues and registered under a false name. It seems he doesn't want any media attention. Veronica swiveled in her Italian leather chair, a calculating smile forming on her perfectly painted lips. Interesting. You also mentioned something about a nurse, didn't you? Yes, ma'am. Apparently, Mr. Monroe has shown a special interest in one of the nurses attending to him. The staff has noticed how his mood changes when she enters his room. Veronica's eyes narrowed. She had followed Alexander's career since she left him, watching with bitterness as he overcame the crisis and multiplied his fortune to levels she had never imagined. She had often regretted her decision, but her pride prevented her from admitting it openly. Get the car ready, she finally ordered. We're going to pay a visit to the hospital. Meanwhile, Lucy kept her promise to emotionally distance herself from Alexander. For 2 days, she had managed to limit their interactions to the bare necessities, entering his room only when unavoidable and always accompanied by other medical staff. Alexander noticed the change with growing frustration. He tried several times to start a conversation, but she would respond with professional kindness and short sentences that left no room for more. "Did I do something to upset you?" he finally asked, when he managed to get her in his room alone. "No, Mr. Davis," Lucy replied in a neutral tone, adjusting his IV drip. "I'm simply doing my job as required." "I thought we had a connection," he insisted, "that we were friends." Lucy glanced at him briefly, allowing herself to remember the conversations they had shared, the warmth she felt in his presence. "A patient and their nurse can't be friends, Mr. Davis. It's better to keep things professional." Before Alexander could reply, the door to the room swung open. A tall woman, impeccably dressed in an eggplant-colored pantsuit and heels that likely cost more than Lucy's monthly salary, strode in as if she owned the place. "Alexander, my love, I finally found you." Lucy watched as Alexander's face went pale, not from illness but from what looked like a mix of shock and horror. "Veronica, what are you doing here?" His voice was tense, almost hostile. The woman approached the bed, completely ignoring Lucy, and leaned in to kiss Alexander on the cheek, leaving a smear of red lipstick. "Is that any way to greet the woman who was almost your wife? When I heard about your condition, I dropped everything to come see you. I've been so worried." Lucy tried to slip out of the room discreetly, but Veronica finally turned her gaze on her, studying her from head to toe with a look that made her feel small and insignificant. "You must be the nurse everyone is talking about," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Alexander has always had a soft spot for charity cases. "Veronica, that's enough," Alexander intervened, but she continued as if she hadn't heard him. "It's lovely to see how much you care for him," she said to Lucy with feigned kindness. "He's always been a very generous man. I'm sure he'll reward you handsomely for your special attentions." The insinuation hit Lucy like a slap. Suddenly the pieces fell into place. The supposed assistance program, Alexander's interest in her life, it all took on a new, sordid meaning under the words of this elegant woman who clearly knew him intimately. "Excuse me," Lucy murmured, heading quickly for the door. "I'll be back later with his medication." "Lucy, wait!" Alexander called, but she was already gone. The rest of her shift was torture for Lucy. Every time she passed near Alexander's room, she saw Veronica inside, sometimes sitting by his bed, other times talking animatedly on her phone, always acting as if she owned the space. The nurses and aides whispered about Mr. Davis's fiancée and what a beautiful couple they made. Lucy learned through these comments that Veronica had introduced herself to the staff as Alexander's almost wife, explaining they were on a break when he fell ill, but that his hospitalization had made her realize how much she loved him. "Are you okay?" asked Teresa, a colleague, seeing her look paler than usual. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," Lucy answered mechanically. "Just tired." At the end of her shift, Lucy had to enter Alexander's room one last time to administer his nightly medication. She prayed that Veronica would be gone, but there she was, now in an evening dress as if preparing for a gala. "Oh, here's our devoted little nurse," Veronica commented with a venomous smile. "Alexander hasn't stopped talking about you. I'd almost be jealous if it weren't so adorable." Lucy kept her face impassive as she prepared the injection. Her hands worked with professional efficiency, though inside she felt something breaking. "Lucy, I need to talk to you," Alexander said, ignoring Veronica. "It's not what you think. She's not—" "You don't have to explain anything to me, Mr. Davis," Lucy interrupted him, her voice cold. "I'm your nurse, sir, that's all. Your fiancé is very lucky to have you." She administered the injection and gathered her supplies with precise, distant movements. "Good night," she said, and without waiting for a reply, she walked out of the room. In the hallway, Lucy took a deep breath, fighting back the tears that threatened to spill. She felt foolish, naive. How could she have thought, even for a moment, that a man like him could be genuinely interested in someone like her? He was probably just looking for a distraction during his recovery, maybe even having some fun at the expense of the exhausted nurse who had shared her troubles with him. What she didn't see was the scene that unfolded inside the room after she left. Alexander, angrier than he had been in years, confronted Veronica. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" he demanded, in a voice that would have terrified any of his employees. "Helping you see reality, darling," Veronica replied, unperturbed. "That woman doesn't belong in your world. She's just another employee, probably looking to cash in on your vulnerability. You have no idea who she is, Alexander shot back, his voice trembling with rage. And you have no right to introduce yourself as my fiancé. We ended years ago, when you decided I wasn't worth betting on during tough times. I made a mistake, Alexander. We both know it. We were young, impulsive. We're different people now, more mature. Think about it. Together, we would be unstoppable. Your company, my pharmaceutical firm, it's a perfect alliance. Alexander looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and contempt. Get out of my room, Veronica, and don't come back. She smiled, picking up her designer handbag. I'll leave for now, but you haven't seen the last of me. And as for your little nurse, well, let's just say I've already made sure she understands her place. Meanwhile, Lucy walked in the rain towards the subway station, not caring that she was getting soaked. The cold drops running down her face mixed with silent tears, tears she promised herself would be the last she ever shed for Alexander Davis, or whatever his real name was. The days following Veronica's appearance were extremely difficult for everyone. Alexander had barred her from his room, but she found ways to send ostentatious gifts and floral arrangements, so large they barely fit in the space. Meanwhile, Lucy maintained her professional distance, entering only when strictly necessary, and always with another nurse. Dr. Ramirez noted the tension every time he entered the room. During his Wednesday morning rounds, he frowned as he reviewed the latest results. I don't like what I'm seeing, Mr. Davis, he said, studying the EKG. Your heart rate is erratic, your blood pressure is elevated, and your stress levels are affecting your recovery. What do you suggest, doctor? Alexander asked, though without much concern. We need to run more tests, but I'm afraid your condition has deteriorated. We could be talking about surgery. Over the next 48 hours, Alexander underwent numerous tests. The final diagnosis confirmed the doctor's fears. He needed high-risk open-heart surgery. The mitral valve is severely damaged, Dr. Ramirez explained during a meeting with the medical team. Additionally, there are significant blockages in 2 coronary arteries. Without surgery, the prognosis is unfavorable. What are the risks? Asked Rick, who was attending on Alexander's behalf. Considerable, replied the cardiac surgeon, Dr. Mendez. The operation itself carries a 30% risk of serious complications, including cardiac arrest during the procedure. His current state is already delicate, and the emotional stress of the past few weeks hasn't helped. Lucy heard the news during the shift change. Though she tried to keep her expression neutral, a lump formed in her throat. When is the surgery? She asked Teresa, who was giving her the report. First thing tomorrow morning. Dr. Mendez doesn't want to wait. They say he's on the list for the post-op ICU. That night, as Lucy was making her rounds, she found a note in her locker. I need to talk to you before the surgery. Please, it's important. Room 512, 11:30 p.m. Alexander. She hesitated for a long time. Her professional ethics told her to ignore the note, that keeping her distance was the right thing to do, but something deeper, something she couldn't rationally explain, pulled her to the door of room 512 at 11:35 p.m. She found Alexander awake, the dim light of the nightstand lamp casting shadows on his face, which was paler and thinner than when she first met him. I didn't think you would come, he said when he saw her enter. I shouldn't be here, Lucy replied, staying near the door. You need to rest for tomorrow. That's exactly why I had to see you. Alexander tried to sit up a little. If I don't make it through tomorrow, I want you to know that I've never met anyone like you. She's not my fiancée, she's my past, a mistake I made years ago. Lucy wanted to speak, but he held up a hand to stop her. I don't want your pity. I just wanted you to know the truth. I've hidden who I really am from you, and I'm sorry. My full name is Alexander Monroe. Yes, that Monroe. But when I'm with you, I just want to be Alexander. The impact of the revelation left Lucy speechless. She had heard the name on the news, seen his picture in business magazines. Alexander Monroe, the tycoon, the ruthless businessman. Why are you telling me this now? She finally managed to ask. Because tomorrow, I might not get another chance. His voice sounded tired, resigned. And because, no matter what happens, I wanted at least one person in this world to know the real me. Not the businessman, not the millionaire, just the man. Lucy felt tears welling up, but held her composure. You should rest, she said softly. They'll need you to be strong for tomorrow. She left the room, her heart aching painfully in her chest. For the rest of the night, as she attended to other patients, her mind constantly returned to that room, to the man who might not see the next day's dawn. The surgery began promptly at 7 a.m. Lucy, finishing her night shift, paused outside the operating room door just as they were wheeling Alexander in on a gurney. Their eyes met briefly. He tried to smile, raising his hand slightly in a small gesture that only she understood. The next few hours were an eternity. Although Lucy should have gone home after her exhausting shift, she found herself unable to leave the hospital. She took refuge in the nurses' lounge, pretending to review charts, while discreetly asking for updates on the surgery from any colleague who came out of the surgical area. At 10:42 a.m., a commotion in the hallway sent a chill down her spine. She heard fragments: cardiac arrest, defibrillator, code blue. 3 hours later, the operating room doors finally opened. Dr. Mendez emerged, his face etched with exhaustion. "We managed to stabilize him," he informed the group of waiting doctors, "but he suffered a prolonged cardiac arrest during the operation. He's in a medically induced coma, and the next 48 hours will be critical." The news spread like wildfire throughout the hospital. By the time Lucy returned for her next shift, everyone was talking about the millionaire patient who had miraculously survived an impossible surgery. Alexander was moved to the intensive care unit, where only authorized personnel were allowed. Lucy wasn't assigned to that area, but the head nurse, aware of the professional relationship they had developed, gave her special permission to visit him during her break. 15 minutes, Miller, not one more, she warned. When Lucy entered the ICU room, she stopped in her tracks. The strong, charismatic man she had known now lay motionless, connected to a ventilator, with tubes and wires monitoring every aspect of his fragile existence. The constant beeping of the machines was the only sound in the room. She slowly approached the bed. With trembling hands, she took Alexander's limp hand in hers. It was cold, so different from the warmth she had felt in that brief touch days ago. In that moment, all her defenses crumbled. The tears she had held back for weeks began to flow freely down her cheeks. "You can't leave now," she whispered, gently squeezing his hand. "I've spent so much time taking care of everyone, never letting myself feel, and then you showed up, in 3 different hospitals, as if fate insisted on putting you in my path." The room's silence was broken only by the steady beeping of the monitors and her soft sobs. "I'm scared to admit it, but I think I've fallen in love with you," she confessed, her voice barely audible. "Please fight. Come back." What Lucy didn't know was that, minutes before she arrived, the doctors had begun to reduce the sedation to assess Alexander's neurological response. Although he appeared unconscious, part of his brain had started to register stimuli. Suddenly, she felt a faint squeeze in her hand. So light, she thought she had imagined it. But then it happened again, more defined this time. She held her breath, watching Alexander's face. Slowly, as if it required a superhuman effort, his eyelids began to flutter until they finally opened. His eyes, slightly unfocused, searched until they met hers. "I've been waiting to hear that," he whispered, his voice raspy and barely audible over the tube in his throat. "I came back for you." Lucy was frozen, unable to believe what was happening. She should call the doctors immediately, let them know he had woken up. But for a moment, just one moment, she allowed herself to get lost in those eyes that looked at her with an intensity that transcended the pain and weakness. "Alexander," she called softly, fearing it was a cruel illusion. He tried to smile despite the breathing tube. "Not going anywhere," he rasped out. "Not now. That I know. You love me." Lucy pressed the call button, and seconds later the room filled with doctors and nurses, astonished at the patient's unexpected awakening. As they pushed her aside to examine Alexander, Lucy stood in a corner, her heart overflowing with an emotion she thought she had forgotten: hope. The days following Alexander's awakening were a source of amazement for the medical team. Dr. Mendez didn't hide his bewilderment during morning rounds. "I've never seen a recovery like this after such a prolonged cardiac arrest," he commented, while reviewing the latest test results. "His cardiac markers are improving daily, the inflammation has significantly decreased, and his neurological response is perfect." "Does that mean I'm out of the woods?" asked Alexander, who had already been moved from the ICU to a private room. "I wouldn't go that far just yet," the doctor replied cautiously. "But if you continue like this, in a few weeks we could consider discharging you to complete your recovery at home." Alexander smiled, looking toward the door where he knew Lucy would soon appear. Since he woke up in the ICU, something had changed between them. Her confession, which she thought he couldn't hear, had torn down the walls they had both built. "I think I have a good reason to recover quickly, Doctor." Lucy had requested to be officially assigned as Alexander's nurse during his recovery. The head nurse, seeing the positive results, agreed, though not without a warning. "Miller, I know you've grown fond of the patient. It's normal, it happens. But remember to maintain your professionalism, understand?" Lucy nodded, though inside she knew the line between professional and personal had been irrevocably blurred since that moment in the ICU. Every day, in addition to her nursing duties, Lucy spent her breaks with Alexander. At first, the embarrassment of her confession made her blush whenever he looked at her with that intensity that seemed to see right through her. But soon, their conversations flowed more freely and deeply than before. "Tell me more about your daughters," Alexander asked one afternoon as they shared a coffee he had ordered from a nearby cafe, tired of the hospital's bland brew. "They're my whole world," Lucy replied, showing him photos on her phone. "Here they are in Central Park. It was their birthday last month." Alexander looked at the picture of the two identical little girls, with their colorful dresses and smiles revealing tiny milk teeth. "They're beautiful," he said sincerely. "They have your smile. And their father's strong will," Lucy added with a mix of pride and melancholy. "Sophia convinced Miranda it was a good idea to color the walls with crayons last week. My mum almost fainted when she saw the mural they created." Alexander laughed, imagining the scene. "Artists in the making. They should see my art collection. I have some Pollock and Warhol pieces that might inspire them." "Right, as if I could take them to a museum of that caliber without them destroying something." "I'm not talking about museums," Alexander clarified. "They're pieces I have at home." Lucy looked at him with a renewed awareness of who the man before her truly was. Sometimes, during their conversations, she would forget she was with one of the most powerful businessmen in America. It was during one of those afternoons that the incident occurred that changed the course of things once again. A newly graduated nurse, covering for another during their break, rushed into the room. "Mr. Monroe, sorry for the delay. I need to change your IV and—" She stopped, seeing Alexander's expression and the confusion on Lucy's face. "Thanks, I'll take it from here," Lucy intervened quickly. When the young nurse left, an uncomfortable silence filled the room. "Why did you never tell me who you really were?" Lucy finally asked, vaguely recalling him mentioning his full name the night before the surgery, but she had been so shocked that she had barely processed the information. Alexander looked at her intently before taking her hand in his. "Because for the first time in my life someone saw me as a person, not a bank account or an opportunity," he answered honestly. "You took care of me because you cared, not because of who I am or what I have." Lucy felt her eyes fill with tears. "That doesn't change anything," she said finally. "You're still the same stubborn man who has shown up in 3 different hospitals." Alexander smiled, relieved by her reaction. "And you're still the most dedicated and beautiful nurse I've ever met." What neither of them knew was that, outside the hospital, Veronica Sinclair had not abandoned her plans. Ever since she learned of Alexander's miraculous recovery and his growing closeness with the nurse, she had intensified her surveillance. "I want everything you can find on Lucy Miller," she ordered a private investigator from her luxurious office. "Work records, credit history, family situation, debts, background, anything that could be useful." "Anything in particular you're looking for, Miss Sinclair?" asked the investigator, a former cop with contacts at every level. "Any sign of wrongdoing, no matter how small," Veronica replied, staring at a photo of Lucy she had obtained from the hospital's personnel file. "Everyone has secrets or has made mistakes. I just need to find hers." The investigator nodded and left, leaving Veronica to her thoughts. The news that Alexander had requested to be discharged the following week had put her on high alert. She knew that once he was out of the hospital, it would be harder to control the situation. "I'm not going to lose this opportunity," she muttered to herself, "not after waiting so many years." Meanwhile, in the hospital, Alexander and Lucy enjoyed a quiet moment, watching the sunset from the room's window. "Have you thought about what you'll do when you get out of here?" Lucy asked, trying to keep her tone casual, though the idea of not seeing him daily caused an unease she didn't want to admit. "I have a lot of plans," he answered mysteriously, "but the most important one includes you." "Me?" Lucy looked at him surprised. "When I get out of here, I want you to see my real home," Alexander said, turning to look at her directly. "And if you like it, maybe you could consider moving there with your daughters and your mother. There are specialists who could help her." Lucy was speechless. The proposal was as unexpected as it was overwhelming. "Alexander, I can't accept something like that. We barely know each other, and we know each other better than you think," he interrupted gently. "You've seen me at my most vulnerable. You know my fears, my hopes, and I've seen your strength, your dedication, your heart. I'm not asking for an answer now. I just want you to consider it." Lucy nodded, unable to find the right words. On one hand, she felt everything was moving too fast. On the other, she couldn't deny the deep bond that had formed between them. "I'll think about it," she finally promised. What Lucy didn't know was that while she was contemplating a future with Alexander, the shadows of both their pasts were closing in. Veronica Sinclair had set a plan in motion that could destroy not only their budding relationship, but the very life Lucy had fought so hard to build. And time was running out. A week after being discharged, Alexander finally convinced Lucy to visit his home. She had made 1,000 excuses. Complicated shifts, the girls had the flu, her mother needed her. But the truth was, she felt an irrational fear of seeing that part of Alexander's life. "It will just be for a little while," he had insisted over the phone. "Rick will pick you up whenever you say. No pressure, no strings attached." Finally, on a Sunday afternoon, Lucy agreed. She left the girls with her mother and waited nervously in front of her apartment building in Astoria. When a black Mercedes pulled up, she almost backed out. "Ms. Miller," Rick greeted her formally as he opened the door. "Mr. Monroe is waiting for you." The drive was silent. Lucy watched out the window as the neighborhoods transformed, becoming increasingly luxurious until they entered Greenwich, Connecticut, one of the most exclusive areas in the country. "We've arrived," Rick announced, as the car stopped before an imposing gate. Lucy held her breath as the gate swung open electronically, revealing an estate that looked like something out of a movie. A winding driveway lined with ancient trees led to a mansion that blended colonial elements with modern design. "This can't be real," she murmured to herself. Alexander was waiting for her at the entrance, leaning lightly on a cane. Though he still showed signs of his convalescence, he looked remarkably better since leaving the hospital. "Welcome to my home," he said with a nervous smile, as if fearing her reaction. What followed was like a tour of a private museum. Enormous rooms with high ceilings, furniture that looked like exhibition pieces, and works of art Lucy had only seen in books or during that one school trip to the Met when she was a teenager. "That's an original Jackson Pollock," Alexander commented casually, noticing her gaze fixed on a vibrant canvas. "And that one over there is an early Georgia O'Keeffe." A team of staff appeared and disappeared discreetly as they toured the property. The grounds were as impressive as the interior. Fountains, sculptures, a greenhouse, and even a small man-made lake with koi fish. "It's too much," Lucy finally said, feeling breathless. She sank onto a marble bench next to a fountain. Alexander sat beside her, watching her overwhelmed face. "I know, sometimes it feels that way to me, too. I don't fit in this world," Lucy confessed, looking at her worn shoes against the immaculate marble floor. "My daughters would break some priceless statue on their first day." Alexander laughed heartily, the sound echoing in the garden. "Statues can be replaced," he replied, gently taking her hand. "What's priceless is the happiness you all would bring to this empty house." They continued the tour, this time heading into the east wing of the mansion. Alexander opened a door to reveal a large, bright room equipped with the latest medical technology, elegantly camouflaged among traditional furniture. "This would be for your mother," he explained. "I consulted with the best rheumatoid arthritis specialists. With the right equipment and regular therapy, her quality of life could improve significantly." Lucy ran her fingers over a hospital bed that looked more like a piece of luxury furniture than medical equipment. Beside it, discreetly installed, were state-of-the-art monitors and devices. "And this," Alexander continued, opening double doors at the end of the hall, "would be for Sophia and Miranda." The room that appeared before them made Lucy bring a hand to her mouth, stifling a gasp. It was a playroom straight out of a fairy tale, walls painted like an enchanted forest, a dollhouse so large the girls could walk into it, shelves filled with children's books, educational toys, and 2 small canopy beds. "Alexander, this is—" Words failed her. "Too much?" he asked with concern. "It's perfect," she replied, tears in her eyes, "but I can't accept it. It's like a dream I'd eventually have to wake up from." "It doesn't have to be just a dream," he insisted, moving closer. It could be your reality, our reality. While Lucy wrestled with her emotions in Alexander's mansion elsewhere, Veronica Sinclair was finalizing her plan. In her private office at Aztec Labs, she reviewed the forged documents she had meticulously prepared. "Are you sure about this, Ms. Sinclair?" asked the nervous IT guy she had hired to hack into the hospital databases. "This is more than just changing a few records. We're talking about destroying someone's career. You could even face criminal charges." "Am I paying you for a lecture on morality?" Veronica shot back coldly. "Just do your job. No one will be able to trace the changes back to us." The plan was meticulous. Falsified records showing Lucy signing for controlled substances that never reached patients, manipulated schedules placing her at the scene of medical errors, and even fabricated complaints from non-existent patients. "It's all done," the tech confirmed after a few hours. "The modified records are now in the central system for all 3 hospitals." "Excellent," Veronica smiled, handing him an envelope. "Here's the rest of your payment. And remember, if you ever mention this to anyone—" I know, the man interrupted, pocketing the envelope. "We never met." The next day, as Lucy was getting ready for her shift at Lenox Hill, she received a phone call that made her blood run cold. Nurse Miller, the voice of the hospital administrator, was unusually formal. "I need you to report to my office immediately for an urgent disciplinary meeting." "Disciplinary?" Lucy repeated, confused. "May I ask what this is about?" "I'd prefer to discuss it in person, and I suggest you bring a union representative or legal counsel if possible." When Lucy arrived at the administrator's office, she felt like she was walking into a nightmare. Seated around a conference table were not only the director of Lenox Hill, but also representatives from the other 2 hospitals where she worked, the head of security, and 2 police officers. "Please have a seat, Nurse Miller." The director indicated, his expression grim. With trembling hands, Lucy sat down, aware of all the eyes fixed on her. "We have evidence that you have been diverting opioids and other controlled substances," the director began, sliding a folder toward her. "Furthermore, several patients have filed complaints of negligence." Lucy opened the folder and felt the floor drop out from under her. There were documents with her signature, medication logs, altered schedules, a complete file painting her as a negligent and dishonest professional. "This isn't true," she managed to say, her voice barely a whisper. "I've never... These aren't my signatures. I didn't..." "The signatures have been verified by a handwriting expert," one of the police officers intervened, "and they match your employment file." "Nurse Miller," the director continued gravely, "given the severity of these accusations, we are obligated to suspend you immediately from your duties at all 3 hospitals pending a formal investigation. I must also inform you that the police have questions regarding the possible trafficking of controlled substances." Lucy felt like she couldn't breathe. In a matter of minutes, everything she had worked for years was crumbling before her eyes. Her reputation, her career, her ability to provide for her family, all destroyed by accusations she didn't understand. "This is a mistake," she insisted, tears threatening to spill. "Someone is trying to frame me. I would never do something like this." As those present exchanged skeptical glances, Lucy had the distinct feeling that this was no mistake. It was a carefully laid trap, and she had a suspicion about who might be behind it. News of Lucy Miller's suspension spread like wildfire among the staff of the 3 hospitals, the hallways filled with whispers, suspicious glances, and a few looks of pity. Colleagues she had worked with for years now avoided her as she collected her belongings, escorted by security guards as if she were a criminal. "I don't understand," Lucy sobbed in the small living room of her apartment that night. "How can they believe I would do something like that? What am I going to do now?" Carmen, sitting beside her with her arthritis-ridden hands resting on her lap, tried to comfort her. "The truth always comes out, honey. God knows who you are." "God might know, Mum, but the hospitals have suspended me, the police are investigating me, and without a job, how will we pay for your medication? The rent? Food for the girls?" The twins, oblivious to the unfolding drama, played in a corner with rag dolls Lucy had sewn during her rare free moments. The phone rang, startling them. It was Alexander, who had already heard everything. "Lucy, I'm sending Rick right now. I want you, the girls, and your mother to come to my house." "I can't do that, Alexander. This is something I have to solve myself." "Please," he insisted, his voice cracking for the first time since she had known him. "Let me help you. You don't have to face this alone." After a long pause, Lucy finally agreed. 2 hours later, She, her mother, and the twins arrived at the Monroe estate. Meanwhile, at his offices in the financial district, Alexander assembled an elite team, the best law firm in the country, private investigators, and cybersecurity specialists. "I want you all to understand something," he began, his voice filled with determination. "I know this woman better than anyone. She has sacrificed her own well-being for years to care for others. This is a frame-up." The lead attorney, Ethan Cole, a man with decades of experience in complex cases, nodded gravely. "Mr. Monroe, with all due respect, even if we agree that Ms. Miller has been framed, we need more than your personal conviction. These are extremely serious allegations." "I know," Alexander replied. "That's why I want you to investigate every detail, every record, every signature. I want you to find inconsistencies, witnesses, anything that can prove her innocence. And I want you to specifically investigate Veronica Sinclair." "The CEO of Aztec Labs?" one of the investigators asked, surprised. "What would be her motive? Spite, ambition, and the obsession to reclaim what she once threw away," Alexander answered curtly. The team began working immediately, setting up a command center in one of the mansion's wings. Meanwhile, Lucy and her family settled into the rooms Alexander had prepared for them. Carmen, initially reluctant to accept such luxury, changed her mind when the medical specialists hired by Alexander began treating her. For the first time in years, the constant pain that tormented her began to subside. The twins, for their part, were thrilled with their new room. They ran back and forth, discovering every corner of the playroom, their laughter filling the mansion that had been silent for so long. But for Lucy, adjusting was much harder. Despite Alexander's support, she felt her life was falling apart. Every morning, she anxiously checked the news only to find more details about the case. Nurse accused of drug theft, possible trafficking ring in hospitals, the double life of a caregiver. "I can't stand it," she said one morning, throwing the newspaper in the trash. "They've destroyed everything I built. Who will ever hire a nurse accused of stealing medication? My career is over." "Not if we prove your innocence," Alexander replied, holding her. "And we will, I promise you." That same afternoon, as Alexander was reviewing some preliminary reports from his investigators, he received an unexpected visitor. Veronica Sinclair appeared at his mansion, dressed in an elegant black dress and an expression of false concern. "How could you let her in?" Alexander demanded of his security staff. "She said she had information about the case, sir," the guard apologized. "We thought you'd want to hear it." Veronica walked into Alexander's study with the confidence of someone on solid ground. "Alexander, darling, I came as soon as I heard what happened. What a terrible situation." "Save the act, Veronica. What do you want?" "I'm just worried about you," she replied, sitting down uninvited. "You were always too trusting. I warned you about getting involved with someone you barely know. How do you know she didn't get close to you for your money?" Alexander watched her closely, noticing her calculating smile, the triumphant gleam in her eyes. Suddenly, all the pieces clicked into place. "You're behind this," he accused her directly. Instead of denying it, Veronica let out a light laugh. "Me? Why would I do something like that? I have my own fortune, my own company. Because you could never stand that I moved on after you left me. Because when you saw I had found someone I truly cared about, you couldn't handle it." Veronica stood up, her mask of concern completely gone. "Prove it," she challenged. "All they have on that nurse are official records, verified signatures, testimonies. What do you have? A gut feeling. Love." She spat the last word out like poison. "I have resources you can't even imagine," Alexander replied, stepping toward her menacingly, "and I'm going to use every last one of them to find the truth." "We'll see," she smiled, heading for the door. "By the way, where is your beloved nurse? Hiding?" To the surprise of both, the door opened, and Lucy appeared on the threshold. She had overheard part of the conversation and decided to face her accuser. "I'm right here," she said with a dignity that impressed even Veronica. "And I'm not hiding. I'm waiting for the truth to come out." The two women stared at each other, so different yet so similar in their determination. "Enjoy your stay at the mansion," Veronica finally said with malice. "It won't last long." When Veronica left, Lucy collapsed into Alexander's arms. "She's going to completely destroy me, isn't she?" "No," he replied firmly. "I won't let her." The following days were an emotional roller coaster. The investigators hired by Alexander began to find small inconsistencies in the forged records, impossible schedules, signatures that didn't quite match Lucy's usual pattern, patients who had supposedly filed complaints but didn't appear in other hospital records. Simultaneously, the newspapers continued to publish details of the case, each more sensational than the last. Some of Lucy's neighbors were interviewed, and although most spoke well of her, the headlines highlighted any negative comment. One afternoon, as Lucy watched her daughters play in the garden, trying to maintain some normalcy in their lives, Alexander approached with a serious yet hopeful expression. "I think we have something," he announced. "One of the IT specialists found traces of unauthorized access to the hospital system right before the altered records appeared. Is that enough to prove my innocence?" "It's a start," he replied, taking her hands, "but I promise you I won't rest until your name is completely cleared." Lucy rested her head on Alexander's shoulder, watching her daughters laugh under the afternoon sun. "I won't let them destroy your life," he promised again. "We will find the truth." And for the first time since the nightmare began, Lucy felt she could actually believe him. The weeks leading up to the disciplinary hearing were the most intense of Lucy's life. While Alexander's lawyers and investigators worked tirelessly, she decided to take an active role in her own defense. She couldn't just stand by while they tried to destroy everything she had worked so hard to build. "I need to review every case file myself," she told Alexander one morning, determined. "I know my job better than anyone. If there are inconsistencies, I can find them." Admiring her strength, Alexander set up a complete office for Lucy in the mansion. For days, she meticulously reviewed every chart, every medication log, every supposed case of negligence, taking detailed notes and flagging any anomaly. "I found it," she exclaimed one night after hours of exhaustive work. "This can't be a coincidence." Alexander and the lawyer, Ethan Cole, rushed in. All the affected patients were under the care of the same supervisor, Sylvia Moreno, Lucy explained, showing them her notes. "And the strangest thing is, I never noticed this before, but Sylvia is always on the same shifts as me at all 3 hospitals. It's like she's following me." Cole took notes quickly. "Do you know this supervisor personally?" "Not really. She arrived about 6 months ago, transferred from a private hospital. She's pretty reserved." "I'll investigate this Sylvia Moreno immediately," Cole promised. It didn't take long to discover that Sylvia had previously worked at a private clinic associated with Aztec Labs and had been close friends with Veronica Sinclair since college. Simultaneously, the tech team had been analyzing security footage from the 3 hospitals. After reviewing hundreds of hours of video, they found something crucial. On multiple occasions, Sylvia Moreno was seen in controlled medication storage areas outside of her normal hours, sometimes accompanied by a pharmacy tech named Ramon Duran. "We need to talk to that tech," Alexander directed. "He could be the weakest link." Finding Duran wasn't easy. He had apparently quit his job and disappeared shortly after the scandal broke. They finally located him in Miami Beach, trying to keep a low profile. When the investigators confronted him with the evidence, Duran quickly broke down. "It was just for the money," he confessed through tears. "Miss Sinclair offered me $25,000 to alter the records and forge Nurse Miller's signature. She said no one would get hurt, that she just wanted to teach her a lesson." With this confession and the accumulated evidence, Alexander's legal team was ready for the disciplinary hearing. On the morning of the hearing, the auditorium of the State Board of Nursing was packed. Representatives from the 3 hospitals, members of the Medical Ethics Committee, journalists and onlookers filled every seat. In the front row, Carmen held the hands of her granddaughters, who had insisted on being with their mother on this crucial day. Lucy walked in with her head held high, flanked by Alexander and Ethan Cole. Despite her apparent calm, she was trembling inside. Her professional future, her reputation and her family's well-being all hinged on the outcome of this hearing. To her surprise, Veronica Sinclair was also present, sitting among the witnesses with a confident smirk. Beside her, Supervisor Sylvia Moreno avoided eye contact with everyone. "This hearing is called to order to determine the professional liability of Nurse Lucy Miller regarding the accusations of diversion of controlled substances and medical negligence," began the chairman of the disciplinary board. For the first few hours, the situation looked bleak for Lucy. The board's attorneys presented the records, the supposed signatures, the prepared testimonies. With each new piece of evidence against her, Lucy felt herself sinking, despite knowing it was all a lie. And now, the attorney announced. "We call to the stand Ms. Veronica Sinclair, CEO of Aztec Labs, who witnessed irregular behavior by the accused during her visits to the hospital." Veronica approached the stand with practiced elegance. During her testimony, she described how she had noticed Lucy acting suspiciously near medication cabinets, how she had seen her neglect patients to give priority to Alexander, even hinting at an inappropriate nurse-patient romance. Her interest in Mr. Monroe was obvious to anyone, she declared with feigned concern. Perhaps she saw a financial opportunity, considering her circumstances. Lucy clenched her fists under the table, holding back her outrage. Alexander, beside her, discreetly took her hand, giving her strength. Finally, it was the defense's turn. Ethan Cole stood up calmly, adjusting his glasses. "Members of the board, for the past few hours, we have heard serious accusations against a professional who has dedicated her life to caring for others. Now, allow me to show you the truth." What followed was a devastating presentation of evidence. Security videos showing Sylvia Moreno and Ramon Duran tampering with records, the text-taped confession, handwriting analysis proving the signatures were forged, testimonies from real patients denying they had ever filed complaints, and finally the most damning evidence, bank transfers from an account linked to Veronica Sinclair to both Duran and Moreno. "But the final blow," Cole continued, "are these text messages extracted from Mr. Duran's phone. On the screen, screenshots of conversations appeared where Veronica explicitly ordered him to destroy the nurse and make sure Alexander loses interest in her." A murmur swept through the room. Veronica, paler than ever, shot to her feet. "This is a sham! Those messages are fake!" she yelled, completely losing her composure. "Just like the hospital records you ordered to be forged," Cole countered. In a desperate act, Veronica tried to storm out of the room, only to be met by 2 police officers blocking the door. "Miss Sinclair," one of them announced, "you are under arrest for tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and reckless endangerment." As the officers escorted her out, Veronica shot a look of pure hatred at Lucy and Alexander. "This isn't over," she threatened, before disappearing through the doors. The board needed only 20 minutes to deliberate. When they returned, the chairman announced, "This board finds Nurse Lucy Miller completely exonerated of all charges. We recommend a full investigation into Veronica Sinclair, Sylvia Moreno, and Ramon Duran for conspiracy and falsifying medical evidence." The room erupted in applause. Carmen cried with joy, while the twins ran to their mother for a hug. The directors of the 3 hospitals immediately approached Lucy, offering profuse apologies and the promise of reinstatement with back pay. "That won't be necessary," Alexander intervened, standing up. "If she agrees, I have a better proposal." Silence fell over the room as Alexander took Lucy's hand, and to everyone's shock knelt before her. From his pocket he pulled a small blue velvet box. "Lucy," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "since I met you in that hospital room, you have transformed my life. You have taught me the meaning of courage, dignity, and true love. You've cared for so many, including me. Now I want to spend the rest of my life caring for you. Would you do me the honor of being my wife?" Opening the box, he revealed a simple yet elegant ring with a single diamond that shone brightly under the auditorium lights. Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks, looked at her daughters, who were nodding excitedly, and at her mother, who was smiling in approval. "Yes," she finally answered, her voice barely a whisper. "Yes, I will." The applause thundered as Alexander placed the ring on her finger and rose to kiss her, sealing their engagement in front of everyone. 6 months later, the gardens of the Monroe estate were transformed for an intimate yet beautiful ceremony. Vibrant flowers adorned every corner, and an arch of bougainvillea marked the altar where Alexander waited, fully recovered from his heart condition and happier than ever. Soft music announced the arrival of the bridal party. First came Sophia and Miranda, adorable flower girls in lavender dresses, scattering petals along the path. Then, to the surprise and emotion of all, Carmen walked with a steady gait, remarkably improved thanks to the specialized treatments she had received over the past few months. Finally, Lucy appeared, radiant in a simple yet elegant wedding dress that highlighted her natural beauty. As he watched her walk toward him, Alexander felt his heart, now completely healthy, beat with renewed strength. The ceremony was brief, but deeply emotional. The vows they exchanged spoke of overcoming adversity, of mutual support, of a love that had blossomed under the most unexpected circumstances. "My heart was sick until I met you," Alexander said. "You healed it, not just with your medical care, but with your unbreakable spirit." "You taught me that caring also means letting yourself be cared for," Lucy replied. "With you, I learned that strength isn't about carrying the burden alone, but about sharing the journey." In the months following the wedding, many things changed in the life of the new Monroe Miller family. Alexander established the Valiant Heart Foundation, dedicated to supporting nurses and healthcare staff facing financial hardship, especially single parents. Lucy, as co-director, used her experience to identify those who truly needed help. The foundation also opened a community clinic in one of the city's neediest neighborhoods, fulfilling the dream Lucy had shared with Alexander during their hospital conversations. There, she worked a few hours a week, staying connected to her calling to care for others. The twins grew up happy and secure, adapting surprisingly well to their new life. They developed a special bond with Rick, Alexander's loyal assistant, who became a sort of uncle to them, always ready to read them stories or join them on their adventures in the vast gardens. Carmen's health improved to a degree the doctors called remarkable. Although rheumatoid arthritis has no cure, the specialized treatments and regular physical therapy restored her mobility and significantly reduced her pain. She could now enjoy long walks in the garden and, to her immense joy, actively play with her granddaughters. As for Veronica Sinclair, she was convicted of tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and reckless endangerment. Her company, Aztec Labs, was engulfed in the scandal and lost numerous contracts. As she served her sentence at the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women, she reflected on how her ambition and resentment had destroyed not only her reputation, but also her freedom. The story of Lucy and Alexander, which began in 3 different hospitals through what seemed like coincidences of fate, became a symbol of hope for many, a reminder that true love transcends social and economic differences, and that justice, though sometimes slow, ultimately prevails. One Sunday afternoon, as they watched the twins play in the garden under Carmen's watchful eye, Alexander hugged Lucy from behind, resting his chin gently on her shoulder. "You know, sometimes I think I should thank my heart for failing at the exact moment it did." Lucy smiled, turning to look him in the eye. "And I should thank those 3 exhausting jobs that led me to you in every hospital. Fate is persistent when it wants to bring 2 souls together," Alexander murmured before kissing her softly. In their new life together, the wounds of the past healed day by day. The twins grew up happy and secure. Their grandmother enjoyed a quality of life she never thought possible, and the couple discovered that their hearts, one physically healed and the other emotionally renewed, beat as one, in perfect sync. And so what began as the story of an exhausted nurse working 3 jobs and a sick millionaire hiding his identity, transformed into a story of love, resilience, and justice, proving that sometimes modern fairy tales can come true.